Good morning. The government announces changes to planning regulations, which campaigners say will fail to protect wildlife when smaller building projects are underway. We'll have more on that in just a moment. First, according to the latest figures from Historic England, 900 churches in rural areas of England are at risk of neglect, decay or inappropriate change. In a moment, I'll be talking to the head of the National Churches Trust about why that's happening. All week we're taking a look at historic rural buildings, and of course village churches are just as much part of our rural landscape as trees and hedgerows. Helen Milliken has been to one village church in North Cumbria whose supporters are determined to ensure its survival.
Has he been able to use the original glass?
I don't think he wants to put the glass in until the early bar's been put in.
It's not a church service at St James in Welton that I am interrupting. It's, I suppose, almost a site meeting.
It is a site
of
meeting.
Church Warden Lynn Williams, Church Treasurer Pamela Mitchell, parishioners Graham Gash, Jeff Carruthers, Peter Wyborough, all gathered together in a church where the pews are shrouded in dust sheets. And as we look towards the West End, we don't see the wonderful window. No, we don't see that magnificent window. We see scaffolding and plywood.
And no font. Thank you to Storm Eowyn. It moved the gable end and became dangerous. This is how we first saw it. So there's the roof and there's the gable end coming away. The window split and then inside started to move.
So the gaps and cracks.
The gaps and cracks
everywhere.
There.
It bellied out.
You can see where the window there is bellied and there's actually holes in the window. Having said that, the builders have worked wonders and they've worked really hard and we're on schedule. So we should be open beginning of February and it'll be quite an emotional day.
It's quite a plain church in lots of ways, but very, very beautiful. I mean, looking above us, the rafters, the beams, it's a wonderful construction.
It's amazing how most of these local village churches are all beautiful. We at Welton keenly support our church. All our ancestors are buried here, and without it, well, we regard it as ours, and it's a very special church.
Yeah.
It's a Victorian building.
It's about 1870 odd, yeah. There were a few local houses built at that time, most likely out of local Sanson stone from just on the River Coldew edge there. You expect these buildings that have been built well to last forever. Unfortunately, this has happened in our lifetime, so we've had to deal with it, luckily through insurance. I don't know what would have happened if we hadn't been insured.
As well as being part of the church community, you're all part of the farming community as well. Why does this church matter so much to you?
What we have on the farm is what our ancestors left us. That's why we support the church. We are what we are because of our ancestors, and they're all lying in the churchyard.
Grandparents, parents married here. We were married here, children married here.
Because it was always a meeting place for the country people. It's where the boys met the girls in the old days, and it always was. I think it's a focal point for the community.
It's the main focal point now for the villagers because the pub's gone, the post office has gone, and the school has gone. So all they have left as a community hub is actually the church and the village hall.
An event like a storm and what's happened to your gable end here is unforeseen. It's something that you're not budgeting for.
No.
And of course, with being closed, you won't have had any money coming in.
Exactly. We've lost our income for 12 months and yet the expenses are still the same and, dare I say, will go up enormously in 2026 because who knows what the insurance premium will now go up by. Let's just hope with the will and goodwill of everybody else that we can keep going.
Well, hopefully it'll be okay in my lifetime. I'm expecting to have my funeral service here and probably, hopefully, other people after that.
Parishioners at Welton Church there. Well, as I mentioned, the latest figures show 900 rural churches remain under threat, partly due to changes to government funding for their upkeep. Sir Philip Rutnam is chair of the National Churches Trust.
We're worried that, actually, first of all, the future of our historic churches, particularly in rural areas, we think that's the biggest heritage challenge the country faces. And it's not just a heritage challenge, it's also a challenge to our communities because they're the centre of our community life. In relation to funding, the biggest single issue on the horizon at the moment is the risk that the government will stop providing refunds of VAT, which is done in one form or another for well over 20 years, the VAT costs of repairing these churches, which means that all these buildings which have to be looked after by the local communities will have to raise money not just for the repairs, but also to pay tax to the government on the repairs. So that's the biggest issue on the horizon. And at the moment, there's no certainty about what will be available beyond the end of March next year.
Although the government has said there was still plenty of money left in the pot, more than £13 million. So there was still plenty of scope for churches to apply.
Well, there is some money left in the pot this year, but it is fast running out. And what we've found is that actually, as the amount of funding that's available has gone down, more and more churches are deferring big repairs, which has tended to drive down demand for grants. It doesn't remove the need to repair. It means simply that the repair has been put back. And in fact, if anything, the condition of the building will be worsening.
If a rural church doesn't get very many worshippers, should we really expect taxpayers to foot the bill for repairs? Isn't that up to the Church of England?
I want funding to be available from as many sources as possible, including, for that matter, the Church of England. Though actually the Church of England is not funded, nationally it's not funded parish churches for hundreds of years. For hundreds of years it's been the responsibility of local communities. There are lots and lots of examples where the building may actually not have that many worshippers, but actually continues to be central to the life of the community. What we can't do as a country is simply see these buildings fall into disuse, into disrepair. Future generations would look back at us and say, how was it that they allowed these amazing monuments to the history of our community, the history of our country, to fall into decay? Wasn't that an act of neglect? We need to stop that.
There must be some other solutions, though. A lot of churches do have fundraising events, don't they?
So there are, right across the country, tens of thousands of heroic volunteers keeping these buildings going, running local fundraising events, making applications for funding, finding ways of raising the money to keep the building going. That's all tremendous. What we're saying is that actually they shouldn't have to pay VAT on repairs as well.
Sir Philip Rutnam, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, told us the Listed Places of Worship grant scheme enables religious organisations to claim grants covering eligible VAT costs for essential repairs and renovations. This sits alongside substantial additional funding available through DCMS and our arm's-length bodies, including £100 million from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, allocated between 2023 and 2026. The government has announced its next phase of the National Planning Policy Framework. It repeats its commitment to build 1.5 million homes, but has made some changes to the rules designed to protect nature. The rules on biodiversity net gain in England, in which builders have to improve wildlife content by 10% to mitigate the impact of building, will now exclude smaller developments, as Minister Matthew Pennycook told MPs in the House of Commons.
Having considered carefully the responses to the consultation undertaken by the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs earlier this year, I can confirm that the Government will exempt smaller developments of up to 0.2 hectares from biodiversity net gain and introduce a suite of other simplified requirements to improve the implementation of BNG on small and medium sites that are not exempted.
0.2 hectares is roughly the land needed for 20 small houses. The minister went on to explain why he thought there isn't enough previously developed or brownfield land on which to build all these homes.
What I would gently say to him and others members opposite is that there is no way of building the volume of homes our country needs on brownfield land alone. There is not enough land on brownfield land registered, certainly not that is in the right place and is viable to meet that need. We do need to release more land, including greenbelt land, but we're doing it in a fair way and starting with greybelt land first.
Minister for Housing and Planning Matthew Pennycook. So what do conservation groups think about the changes? Richard Benwell is Chief Executive at the Wildlife and Countryside Link, a coalition of 94 environmental and wildlife groups. I asked him what the changes on biodiversity net gain would mean on the ground when smaller building developments take place.
It's a step backwards because under biodiversity net gain, all new developments, except for the very, very smallest, were expected to more than offset the loss of habitat that comes from development. And we know that at the moment there are lots of loopholes and developers find ways around it. And today there's an announcement that all sites under 0.2 hectares will be exempt completely from the system. So we'll be losing a considerable portion of that investment in nature and that local green space that biodiversity is there to make sure that when new development happens, local people are provided with the green space they need and nature doesn't lose out.
However, the builders say they don't think biodiversity net gain is working. They say that it hasn't actually benefited nature at all, and it's made building much more difficult.
Well, they might well say that, but I don't think there's any world in which we could assume that it's biodiversity net gain that's stopping from builders actually building out those 1.4 million planning permissions they've already got in place. This is a tiny, tiny cost compared with the other things that they face. On the other hand, it's an important amount of money for nature. We're talking over £300 million a year invested in nature at the moment through biodiversity net gain, and that should grow, not be cut back.
There were some promises of wildlife-friendly elements in new homes, things like swift bricks. Now, they help nesting birds actually come in and nest under your eaves. Aren't those positive initiatives?
Yeah, it's absolutely right that every new home should have a swift brick incorporated, as well as lots of other wildlife-friendly features. The problem, Anna, is that we're sort of fighting a rearguard action all the time with this government, trying to make deregulatory proposals that would hurt nature less bad. And swift bricks is, one of those slight bright points amidst a generally bleak background of a growth-focused deregulatory government. There are some other positives in the NPPF as well. We weren't expecting the new protections for local wildlife sites which are in there, which are good. And it looks like there might also be some proposals to strengthen local nature recovery strategies. But these are against a background of a huge gap in the ambition needed to restore nature, and a government that instead is chipping away at the habitats regulations and nature protections that are there to help us achieve that big goal of halting nature's decline.
One other thing the government said, it is simplifying the planning process. It's spending more than £20 million to help recruit additional planners and improve performance of environmental regulators. Will that help?
Yes, it will. And I think the government should focus on that investment in the skills that we need in the planning system to help developers work in a way that's nature friendly. The problems arise when people haven't gone out and found out what's there in the proposed development site and they discover nature late in the process, or where they haven't understood what they need to do to mitigate harm to protected species. So investment in that advice and ecological capacity is good. And the other side of the coin is that enforcement. In many circumstances, developers simply don't fulfil their obligations to build habitat into new developments, or they break the rules. Same for lots of other sectors. And enforcement has been so lacklustre for environmental law for years now that investment in the regulators is urgent.
Richard Benwell from Wildlife and Countryside Link. That's all from us. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Rebecca Rooney. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.